Shem Yazor. Okay, we're going to start Parshas Vayeshev. So there are two essential questions that we're going to deal with. First of all, question number one: why did Yosef go to Yaakov and tell him all sorts of things about the brothers that are just detrimental and seems like Lashon Hara? You're not allowed to speak even the truth about someone else, especially, Yaakov didn't really do anything. So what was the point of telling him? That's question number one. Well, what did he tell him? Seems strange. Very strange things. They did all sorts of things they're accused of doing that it's very hard to explain how such great people could have done such a thing. And we also see the opposite, that the Shvatim sold Yosef. How could they be sure enough to throw him into a pit filled with snakes and scorpions, and then when he survives to sell him to these Midianites and just get rid of him? I mean, you have to really be certain of yourself. What was their calculation? What were they thinking? So we'll start with the Komarna, because that's the first piece that's relevant here. So he said, Yosef, what he saw in the brothers was a very, very fine thing. It wasn't anything that was in any way overt. It was a very subtle problems. So he says, like the Baal Shem Tov tells us, he says, every person, whenever a person did an avera, whenever a person makes a mistake, whenever a person does something wrong, and I see that, I see someone doing something wrong. So that's a mirror to me, that's teaching me how I have to fix myself. When the Baal Shem Tov one time saw somebody doing something you're not allowed to do on Shabbos, most of us would say, hey, what are you doing? Or not what are you doing? Or whatever. So the Baal Shem Tov, he wondered, what did I do wrong? What have I done wrong to see someone else do something wrong? So he asked, and he was told, he made use of a person who's a Talmid Chacham, a scholar, and that was inappropriate for him. And since the Zohar calls a scholar the Shabbos, it's as if he violated the Shabbos in a certain subtle way. She said it's the same thing with the brothers, exact same thing. He said it's the exact same thing. They're talking about something on a subtle level. You saw something on them, it's subtle, and they didn't see it at all. So he says the same thing with Rav Moshe also. He was asked, he put on Shabbos clothing and he started to daven his mincha, and he was crying. He had tremendous tears when he said in his prayer, he said, please forgive me. Slach lonu. I mean, someone over to him, he said, you just taught us that when you put on your Shabbos garments, all your sins are forgiven. Why were you crying so copiously when you asked Hashem to forgive you? You're already forgiven, aren't you? So the tzaddik, he said, listen, you're right, I'm forgiven, but then your soul moves up to another level, and it's like you have to deal with the sins all over again. You have to deal with them on a more subtle, totally different level. He said, so this is what Yosef said. Yosef said they ate Ever Minachai. Ever Minachai means you cut off a limb without killing the animal. That's obviously very painful to the animal, and it's forbidden. So he said the idea there is that when an animal is slaughtered, so you're able to uplift the spiritual content in the animal and give life to your animal soul as well, your nefesh. It holds your soul. Food, this is a long topic which we're not going to get into right now, but food is, we ask God, we say, please, you sustain life, right, with kindness, right? We talk about this in the part of the Shemona Esrei which has to do with gvura, that has to do with might, that has to do with judgments, it's to do with constriction. So the way that the Gra and others explained, he said, listen, you're right, because food, there's a very big element of din. There's a very big element of judgment when it comes to getting parnasa together. It's like our sages tell us it's as hard as splitting the Red Sea. It's Kriyas Yamsuf. It's not easy. It's why? Because when you're sustaining yourself, you're not sustaining your body. You're sustaining your soul. You're sustaining your soul in your body. So it's not so simple. It's not such a simple thing. Again, this is a long topic. It's not for now, but this is the first thing to be aware of. When we eat, we're uplifting sparks. So Yosef saw that the brothers were not uplifting sparks. When they were eating the food, they weren't uplifting things like they should be, as if they were cutting off the limb from its source. So from his level, he was in a higher place than the brothers. From his level, he said, you guys are really messing up. And he told Yaakov, you guys are really messing up. Now, it's the same thing with everything else. You know, he said that they're acting appropriately with the women of the community or wherever they were, of the people around. This also meant they were doing business in a way that maybe wasn't inconstant, it wasn't proper for their high level. It doesn't mean that they were doing anything that's really unseemly. Just from Yosef's perspective, it was unseemly. Also, the other brothers calling them the children of the maidservants, and also it's the same thing. It doesn't mean that they actually called them anything. They just didn't treat them with the same exact honor. And from Yosef's perspective, that was a subtle blemish. Okay, so the question he asks now, the Komarna, he says, I have a question, very simple question. Why is it, when you take Yaakov and you take Yosef, who is higher? Yaakov is higher. So how come Yaakov couldn't understand what Yosef was telling him? Yosef told him three things. They're very straightforward. He said, from a higher perspective, they're making mistakes. They're erring. They're messing up. So the reason why, he says something very, very fascinating. He says, Rav Micha said in the name of the Baal Shem Tov, that when Esav tricked Yitzchak, we learned about this. Esav tricked Yitzchak. There were a lot of cosmic changes then. One of those was that he made it very hard for a tzaddik, for even a righteous person, to really see bad on his child. So even though Yosef saw, and there was no lashon hara, there was no slander in telling the truth, that they should really be on a higher level, but Yaakov could not see. That's the Komrana. That's why he told what he did, and that's why it wasn't anything wrong with it per se. Now, his mistake, he did make some mistake there. His one mistake was he should have been able to judge them favorably. He should have said, you know what? If I see them failing in this way, well, that must mean that I'm flawed. Maybe I'm not seeing it right. Maybe they don't need to be on such a high level where I am. Maybe I'm just in a different place, and what's demanded of me is not the same as what's demanded of them. That was his mistake, and that's part of why he got punished. So that's the Komarna in Zohar. The next thing we're going to talk about, the Rav Tzadok. Rav Tzadok wonders, how could they, it's an amazing thing. They sold their brother, right? They throw him in a pit. They're selling him, they sell him. And what do? Sit down and eat bread. The verse doesn't discuss so many meals. How come suddenly we're told they had a meal? So they knew, first of all, that what he accused them of, they really had done nothing wrong. So they figured, listen, probably, Avram had Ishmael. Ishmael was the refuse from the soul of Avram. There was something very blemished there, and that's why he was, as it were, in a certain way rejected. His children were no longer able to were not part of the Jewish people. He said, Yitzchak also, he had also the refuse from his soul, that was Esav. And we guess Yosef must be the refuse from Yaakov's soul. Must be. Or at least he certainly is suspected of being such. So they figured, listen, this is what we'll do. We'll cast him in this pit. And we'll see if he's really righteous, if he's really on the level, or he's really holding, so he'll be okay. They cast him in the pit, he was okay, but that doesn't prove anything yet. He said, we're not sure where his source is, so we'll sell him. Get him out. Get him alone, under all sorts of difficult influences, and see how he does. If he's really holding, he'll be okay. If he's really something special which we're not recognizing, we're not understanding, he'll be fine. He'll change it all to the good. And if not, so then he'll be gone, which will be fitting. So they were able to sit down. They had themselves a meal. They were able to. They figured they were fixing the sin of Adam. They were fixing the sin of Adam. The sin of Adam. Adam Arishan ate. He ate from the tree of knowledge. So that's what caused the Avos to have children who were not. You had Ishmael, you had Yosef. They weren't on the level of Yitzchak and Yaakov. So they figured that they had now fixed, or at least made a step to fixing this same blemish, so they should eat in order to pick that up. Okay, so that's the Rav Tzadok for today. So they sold him in order to figure out where he was. That's how he explains. He wants to rule over them. That must be here. Yaakov, now that's Yaakov's Indian. Yaakov is a combination of the kindness of Avram and the strict justice of Yitzchak. So it's proper. One would assume that illicit desire for honor and arrogance would stem from him. So fine, okay, very good. That must be it. And they sold him, and it worked out. They're quite the opposite. He became the one. He wasn't only in a situation where he wasn't influenced. He influenced everyone, and he became the ruler of entire Egypt. And they had to come to him. We'll talk about next week. Right? So now we're going to do a little bit of Zohar. The Zohar explains, first of all, it says, every person, according to when he was born, that determines a lot of what he's going to go through in life. God sends us here in the exact right time for us to live our life the way we're supposed to live. He said sometimes a person can be born in a way, in a time, in a place, which he's going to suffer a lot. He said, but there's a way around the suffering. He said, when a person prays, prayer has the power to nullify all the evil decrees. Because that's when he brings the divine presence into the world and he reveals a totally different level. And that revelation also changes around what he suffers for the better. That's why Nachman says in the Komrana and the Baal Shem Tov and other tzaddiks' works explain that a person should really work hard. We should all work hard to try to realize that what we're going through causes the divine presence also to suffer. It's not just our suffering. Our suffering is mostly a reflection of something on high. So we have to try to picture that and focus on that in order to be saved. Every person, we all go through, Rav Nosson says, everything that happens in the whole Torah, we go through it. We go through the sale of Yosef, all these different things, when we mess up, when we sell out. That's also what the tzaddik says. Well, we sell out in impurity and make a wrong move, make a mistake in terms of where we look, in terms of what we do. We're selling Yosef. So we can be in a situation, we can be in a position where we see things are very hard. We have to know prayer is always there, and that's the way to overcome everything. It says that Yosef dreamed, and the brothers hated him because of his dreams. We see that a person should not tell his dreams in general except for to someone who really loves him. Because otherwise, the way they interpret the dream, that's what causes the dream to happen. It has a power to cause the dream to happen the way it's interpreted. So that was one of the reasons why the brothers were so upset. He told them the dreams, and they said, will you then rule over us? And that set the dream to mean that he was going to rule over them. So they got very upset. And that's why it was so important. Let's see what will happen with his dreams. They're the ones who set it to mean that he's going to rule over them. So that was another important point. Tamar also, the Zohar speaks tremendously in her praise. Praise very much. She understood that she came from a very good place. She was a very, very modest woman. But she knew that this was the tikkun, the way to rectify things was for her to, take herself, get out, and find a way to be the mother of Mashiach. That's what she knew. This is what she had to do. We cannot understand the levels that these people were on, that they're able to make decisions like this, which we just can't begin to. I guess when a person knows that in order not to embarrass someone, they're willing to die, and to have no thought of self at all, be cast in the fire, but to die and leave the world instead of embarrassing someone else. Maybe they're on the level to make a decision of the caliber that she made. But the Zohar speaks very much in her praise that she understood that this was what had to be done. This is the only way to remove to bring out the Neshama of Mashiach from the other side, and that's what had to be. There's one more thing I wanted to talk about. There's a beautiful Darkei Noam I wanted to speak about. The Darkei Noam says, he asked the obvious question, what's this business about Yosef during his test? He saw a reflection of his father, and he was saved. What is this reflection? Usually during a test, the Baal Shem Tov said, the Rebbe brings, they take away your das, they take away your understanding during a test. You don't get to hold on to your understanding. So the deeper works explain that what you work on with your whole self, with every part of you, when you put your whole self into something, that stays with you even during a test. So when a person is really working hard and he's praying, this is what we were saying before, you daven, you get rid of your yusur and your difficulty, you beg and you plead with Hashem, please make this part of who I am. I want to be a pure person. I don't want to mess up this way. I don't want to mess up that way. If that's your entire self, and that's something you put your whole self into, and that's something you're always working on, that's something that you're able to take with you even through a difficult spiritual test. That's something which is yours forever. You don't ever lose that. And we have to work very hard to internalize what we know it to be most important. That's why Nachman says, the ruach sa'ara, the storm wind of the other side is very strong, but if you just hold on, it passes. It passes. And the more we work, and it's not day to day, it takes time. The more we work on internalizing our spiritual goals, our spiritual desires, the more we're going to achieve them, and we're going to get what we need to get and what we're supposed to do in this world. We're all going through the same exact tests that Yosef went through. We're all doing everything, the same thing, ups and downs, and going here and there, and going through sold to Egypt, and we're far away from our spiritual source, far away from everything. We need to be very strong in internalizing Yaakov, holding on to truth, emes. Emes is the way we're able to traverse, we're able to get through the difficult times. Just truth. Where is Hashem here? What does He want me to do right now? That's the main way to connect, and one of the main messages of our Parsha.